episode 1. Let's get into it. Yeah. A little convo, a little inspo. 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 A little convo. Conversation and inspiration. Conversation and inspiration. Yes, this is the Convo and Inspo podcast, and I'm your host, Malaika Jules. This is episode 1, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. Fun fact, this conversation with Junauda Petrus Nash was recorded about a year ago. I would say, March 2020. Originally, I was supposed to be interviewing her in the studios of UCB in Hollywood, but as you know, boom, March 2020, the world shut down. So my girl Junauda had to stay in Minneapolis, and I was here in LA in my home studio where we talked over Zoom. Now, this was that time in quarantine where things were still really peaceful. Violence in the streets by our police officers hadn't gone ablaze like they did a few weeks later with the killing of George Floyd. And so because there was this brief moment of peace at the beginning of quarantine, that peace is what kind of stretches throughout the energy of this conversation. We're just talking about creativity. We're talking about our days in New York. Me and Junauda go way back to my days when I was an MC on the underground of New York City and when she was a youth worker and aerialist in the streets of Brooklyn. I'm so excited to talk with her today about her journey and that winding journey of creativity that led her to become the youth adult novelist that she is today. We're going to discuss her book, The Stars and the Blackness Between Them. And in our section of The Higher Octave, we look back at Junauda's journey and ask her what's something that she thought wasn't too good for her but turned out to be great. That's in our section called The Higher Octave. Thanks so much for tuning in. And now we're going to get into the conversation with Junauda Petrus. So Junauda, I am so happy to be talking to you today. I guess
mutually, it's hella mutual, friends.
It's hella mutual. Listeners should know that we do go way back. Okay,
back to our Brooklyn days.
And for me, I'm so proud of you because you have just written this amazing YA novel, The Stars and the Blackness Between Them, which, by the way, I love reading right now because it literally transports me out of my apartment to like places I've never been. Trinidad and Tobago. I'm in Minneapolis.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
baby.
I'm in these Trini places and I'm loving it. And so I love that. But then you have this astrological aspect and these beautiful poems. What is it that attracted you to astrology? How did you go about studying it and incorporating it? Why did you choose to incorporate it in your book?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think like in the context of writing the book, part of it is like, there's things that are like kind of transmissions. Like all of a sudden you're like, okay, like this is a thing that needs to be a part of this work. And there's also things that like are transmissions that like help with the actual plot movement of it, and just the emotional, like sort of spiritual moving of making a book. So I feel like astrology I've always been obsessed with since I've been very young. And I've always like appreciated not the discipline, but the like structure of it.
Yeah.
Like it's a tender, natural, rhythmic structure, So like for me, when, I was not able to get down with religions or kind of like certain ways of understanding certain religious, thought that I was also attracted to because I've always been interested in spirituality and the divine, Astrology for me was kind of like this obvious sort of like science as a young and art as a young person. So anyhow, like in writing the book, so much of it was like, what are the things that I want young people to be connected to and to understand, as well as like, astrology and the function of the book also becomes a function of the storytelling.
Right.
So yeah, so those are like all of the reasons. And I just love nerding out about astrology because it's just like, oh my gosh, so much, so much.
So it's fun to nerd out too. And the more, it's like the more you know, the more you know. I mean, for me, like your book is bold, writing YA is bold. But let me tell you, really, when I thought about this, I was like, you know, where I identified Junauda's boldness, it was in the moment you decided to leave New York. When you left, and was that like 07, 08, 2010?
It was 2010.
Okay, 2010. So like when you left New York, because I left 2 years later, and I think when you leave New York, or when especially artists, especially Black artists, when we leave New York, the fear is, oh my God, what is it going to be like out here in these streets? I wondered, like, did you have any fears when you left New York? You know, why exactly did you leave New York? And I'm asking you that because what I learned, or what I saw unfold for you after you left, was amazing. And so let's talk about that.
I think that's so real. I think like New York is such a like if we talk about like almost like the pressure that makes diamonds or the pressure that makes pearls, and not in all of the like sort of straight up ways. I think it's like a space that's so intense that it's almost like a force to look inside of yourself and be with yourself. And I come from a very big, very tight-knit Caribbean family in the Midwest. And in some ways, like I think there was aspects of dysfunction that like overshadowed my ability to be who I was. And I think like a lot of my move to New York was very intuitive, very like kind of happened sort of spontaneously in a lot of ways. But when I moved back, I remember like the visit home that I had before I returned back home. And I just remember like, man, just how much sky Minneapolis had, you know, like I remember I was just like, oh, just that, like something about the space of it all. And I feel like, you know, at that time I had made a sort of quiet commitment that like either I was gonna be an artist or fail being an artist or fail trying, you know, like either way, that's what I was going to pursue. And I felt like with my life in New York, so much of New York is surviving to be in New York, unless you got money from somewhere to just let you kick it, you know, like so much of being in New York is the maintenance of being in New York, you know. So living for the city, Stevie Wonder, Tory and Brother, Taurus season. And it truly is. So I feel like for me, like it was a time where I felt ready to return home and had been like strengthened in a way with New York and had started studying circus at that time. So like there was sort of this like whole new world that had opened for me where I was like, yo, like I'm loving circus. I'm loving being an aerialist. And I like came back to Minneapolis with like all this swag and like all of this focus that like in this spaciousness, I was going to like focus on my artistry, you know? So like, I do feel like, I just was hyper committed. And I do think like New York offers a rigor of like, it's like training for a marathon every single day.
For me, I call it, it's boot camp.
Yes, it's totally.
It's like, it's true. Yeah, if you can make it there, you can actually make it anywhere.
Especially like if you believe in yourself, you know, like I think that, so anyhow, like, I totally am so grateful to my experience in New York because it introduced me to people like you, to people like Lucille, to like, I mean, so many artists, like artists who were on Broadway, people who were on movies, people, you know what I mean? And because the thing about it is like, these are people who also shop at your grocery store, who also is in your yoga class. Like, it's like kind of, you know, not this melting pot, but literally it kind of like is a tapestry of all kinds of souls. And it also, I think, revealed to me like the backside of the industry of art that like I'd never been exposed to necessarily in Minneapolis. And I think it really was the beginning of the time to demystify what an artist was, is that like artists is just people who activate their truth in an expressive way in community, you know? So
I love that. Artists activating, expressing, I'm like, what? Yes. And this is why I'm so happy to be talking to you, because it's like all of a sudden you were doing like, you were an aerialist, and I was like, wait, Junauda's an aerialist? And then it was like Junauda kept changing and morphing, and everything you did was so dope. I was like, oh my God, look at Junauda. Like, I was like, yo, I remember thinking, I was like, wow, Minneapolis being really good to her. Like, wow, she's really blooming out there. which is like, which to me was just great to see.
Man, I can't wait till you visit Minneapolis.
I can't wait. I miss you.
I feel like,
I know.
I mean, Prince is from Minneapolis, so that's like enough said.
Enough said.
Yeah. And I think like there's a certain kind of ethos of artistry that's so peculiar. And I mean, I think that's like with every city. I feel like, you know, New York and LA being like movie and motion picture spaces, I think really sort of give like a global sense of those like hyper small, you know, communities and a lot, especially with Issa Rae. I was looking at Insecure recently, you know, and I was just like, I'm so glad she's showing this side of LA. And there's still like a bit of like cute bouginess to it, but I'm not mad at it. Like, I don't see Black people doing that in my, you know. And then there's people like Issa Rae, who reminds me a lot of sisters like you, where you're like, yo, they're like love community. They're creating art in this really like, anyhow. So I do think like as artists, makers, and awkward, weird Black girls who do weird shit like circus and like, you know, cosmic transmissions via rap.
All day.
All day, just all like... Day. And make it silly and make it free and make it like, yeah, this is our ancestors weren't these stoic people in the fields. Like we was fucking shucking and jiving, nigga.
Right.
And you know what I mean? And it's like, it's this, anyways, I feel like, I don't even remember the question, but Minneapolis is great. You know, I can't wait to have you here.
Junauda, you are a storyteller and you are a strong storyteller in various mediums, you know. From what I understand, you've written some plays, honey. From what I understand, honey, I'm seeing filmmaker, okay?
You know, a little something.
I'm seeing book. And so, which I love. I think there are so many people out there who like want to write a play, want to write a book, want to make a film. And I think as creators, we sometimes feel prematurely, especially, that we have to choose. I am a person who writes a book. I am a person who makes a film. You know, how is it that you are able to switch your form? You know, you seem to switch with ease. You know, how is it that you knew that this project should be a play, that project should be a book? You know, give us a little insight.
Gosh, I love your questions, Malaika. I think for me, it's like, I think that's sort of the beauty of not feeling like, besides writing, excuse me, I'm drinking this bubbly water and it's like pop, pip, pip, pop, pop all over my throat and on my mouth. I know, but it feels so good right now.
That's what matters.
Yeah, like I think for me, I was practicing art without thinking about it. Like as a kid, I was like a band geek. I used to love writing like emo poetry. I used to love dancing, you know, like there was always a part of me that just, but I never felt like, ooh, I can be a professional writer. Ooh, I could be a professional dancer. Like I always kind of didn't have this sense of confidence to pursue it.
Yeah.
And then I think what happened, it was interesting when I moved to New York. What the job that brought me to New York was working with Alvin Ailey, their dance camp. I was teaching young. So I was like shocked that me as a Minneapolis girl, like a friend of mine recommended me, Nefri Ameni. And she had done it the year before and like had like referenced me as a person for them to interview. And I got the gig and I was like, okay. So like I was in New York and I was like around taking all these dance classes. I was like living in Harlem and working in Harlem. I was around all these Black people. I would go to these like African dance classes that would be free in Harlem. And, you know, there was just like all of these ways that like artistry, I just had so much like just connection to it. And like I lived within it without it being a barrier. Although there were still all these people who were like I was working with a woman who'd traveled with Cap Calloway in college and, you know, was a tap dancer and just like was like all of the people I worked with were these amazing dancers and creators in New York. And I felt so insecure. I was just like, man, oh my God, talk about imposter syndrome, like enough to make you choke on your, like wake up in anxiety.
Right.
But something about me, I don't know what it is. I mean, I really do feel like there's like ancestors literally pulling me out of my anxiety into the world so that I know that like, I don't have to ask the world permission to be in love with it, to be in bliss with it, you know? So I think like, circus was kind of an interesting sort of shift in my life because as you know, I was like a youth worker and I was teaching like urban gardening and farm and cooking and vegetarian cooking and doing yoga and was like sort of like this hippie Minnesotan Midwestern, like, youth worker in Harlem. And these kids would be like,
So she also grows her own food, y'all, in addition to everything else.
I mean, I know, but I need to start growing it now. I've been taking it because literally, like, that's the thing I also want to share. Like, as an art, a thing is that, like, I feel like there's times in my life that were the focus of certain things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I feel like in New York was my time where I lived by myself.
Right.
I spent a lot of time with myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like was study meditation and these like black and brown, like all of these art, like all of the artists, how in New York, like a lot of so deep. So many artists, black artists in New York are like practitioners of some spiritual, like affiliation, like, so whether it's like Yoruba, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's like long day tantric, like, there's so many things. Like people are not just creators in the world, but they're also like activators of like spiritual work,
Right.
So anyhow, like I feel like when I started just that time in my life, I was like very much with the earth. It was wild because I'd be like, New York is so hyper urban. It's like been urban for so long that I really got to appreciate nature in a certain way. And I really, called the kids that I worked with to be like, yeah, I know these rats running up and down these streets, y'all. Golly, I know there's rats running up and down these streets. But we're going to plant these seeds. They're going to be tomatoes. There's going to be peaches. There's going to be like peppers. We're going to be basil. And that this is stuff that nourishes us. You know what I mean? And like so many dope, like black and brown educators and creatives and stuff I worked with, from like New York, Dominican Republic, all over the world. So anyways, I'm getting to the point. So I feel like all of these were like things that like was nourishing me in a way and like downloading my spiritual like sort of vision so that like when I started studying circus and like literally was swinging from like, ropes in the air doing acrobatics. And I didn't grow up doing shit like that. Like I love to dance and I like ran track for a year, my freshman year. And then I was like, I'm a band geek. Fuck that shit. I got to focus on this heavy ass tuba. I got to run up and down these streets. But yeah, I used to play tuba in high school because I used to play saxophone and clarinet in junior high. And then when I got to high school, it was like 25 flutes, 20 clarinetists, and like 1 tuba player. And they were like, hey, any of y'all woodwinds want to slide over to the brass section? I was like, I don't play the sousaphone. I don't play the tuba. Kind of as a joke and challenge to myself. I fall ass backwards into things because I just be like, whatever. You know what I mean? I'm like, ugh. And then I'm like, okay. And that was kind of like circus to me. I was like, yo, like I met this sister on the train one day. I think we were flirting and I was just like such a repressed gay person, but I was just like, oh, she looks cool. And then when she left the train, she gave me her card and she's like, this is what I do. And it was like her like wrapped up in this yellow silk, like bent, like arched backward like a mermaid in the air. It was so beautiful. And I was like, so I like remember that day I like went back to work and I was like, y'all, look at this acrobatic circle. Who wants to do this with me? And people were like, nobody was interested. I was like, what? Nobody wants to do this shit with me? Fuck that, I'm going.
What come to your show though?
I know, but then I remember going to my first class and it was like the hardest thing I'd ever done. Like, oh my gosh. I like got only like a foot off the ground and it was terrifying, girl. I was like, oh, just like scared. Like I was gonna fall a foot off the ground and die. It was so crazy, just the fear. Like, even though you ain't gonna get hurt, you're just so afraid because all of this has been absorbed in us,
Yes.
And I remember there was a person in class who literally, like, for the warm-ups, what they'd have us do is you would climb the rope to the top of the ceiling and then like invert upside down and slide down. Like that's for the people who'd been studying for a while. Like that's the warm-up. Like you just, because mainly you're climbing the rope and strengthening yourself that like you could just be up there for minutes. You know what I'm saying? So part of that is the climb. The climb is the most exhausting part, and to be able to hold yourself up there and do tricks. So I remember that first class and seeing like this girl like just climb, zoop, and like slide down. And I was like, damn. And like my warm up was like, yo, just hold on to the rope and lift your knees up. Like that was the warm up for me. And I remember I was like, yo, I can't wait till the day that I can do that shit, you know? And then sure enough, like within like a year and a half, like I was able to do that warm up. Like that would be my warm up. And I just remember how like fucking built and strong I felt and like how connected to the ancestors I felt. Cause I was like, yo, like I was thinking about lynching and like our Black bodies in space has at times often meant violence on our bodies, you know? So like doing aerial was like this reclamation and like all of the stories that came to me, you know, through the fact that I was flying in the air, you know, and being around other Black and brown circus artists. I mean, there was a lot of, you know, white folks mainly, but like I'd gotten clicked up with this like, you know, ragtag team of like Black and brown aerialists in New York City.
I love it.
So I just think like that also, once you're hanging in the air dozens of feet above the fucking ground and you're just like, I'm fucking doing this shit. I'm fucking doing this shit. It's really hard to feel afraid of anything else and say no to anything else. I'm just like, yo, like everything has shown a possibility. So yeah, I think like thankfully, I thank God for circus. I thank God for writing. I thank God for Black art, you know, all kinds of art, honestly.
Yeah. Do you feel that like, so it's like, and I mean, your creativity is clearly ongoing, but here we are at this particular moment in time where you do have this like published novel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that like getting to that point of having a completed novel, do you feel that like, you know, your time as an aerialist, your time as a youth worker, your time in the garden, do you feel like that was all part of the path to get to this, you know, and beyond?
I feel like it's both, and I feel like it certainly totally is what brought me here.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even realize it, but it was bringing me here. Mm-hmm. And I think also in and of itself, it's like, wow, like even if those things didn't bring me here, I'm like, wow, like they in the moment shaped so much about myself.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like how I think you could probably say the same thing too. It's kind of like you being a rapper, you know what I mean? Totally, you know, as you shared, has brought you to this like place of like comic and like comedic writer that you were always kind of on a trajectory. Right. But also in and of itself, there were like this interesting meditations of like, yo, like this is part of who I am.
Yes. 100%.
But it is a thing where I'm like, you know, I'm grateful in some ways because as much as like, I'm glad I was a late bloomer in understanding that I was an artist because I think, or I don't know, I think it's all relative, right? Like think about it. Like I think about Maya Angelou, I think about like Toni Morrison, and you and I were talking about this. Yep. You were talking about, who are you talking about? Phyllis Dillard?
Phyllis Dillard. Oh yeah, Phyllis Dillard started in the game at like 35, 37, and I was 35 when I started comedy. And that's when you, so like when you say you're so happy that you were a late bloomer, that's how I feel too. It's like, because now that I'm in my late 30s, like I have the discipline. I'm all for a late bloom, honey. I'm here for it.
But you know, another thing I wanted to say though, and I got this from a friend, and just like as far as people who are like multi-dimensional, multi-genre artists, there's going to be some times where you're nurturing some art forms more than others. Like when I was training aerial, it would be like 3 times a week I'm studying for an hour or so, like climbing ropes, you know, going over routines, studying over notes. Like I couldn't do that and write as many hours as I write and be in a marriage and help raise a kid. And also like embark on other things such as, you know, developing film stuff and you know, like there was a time in my life where I did so much stuff with puppets, like, like that was like a big part of my work. And I still do that a lot. Like I'm adjacent to it and I'm doing more projects, but I do think like there's times because like there's people who they really focus on music or they really focus on circus. So as far as at times I would be critical to myself and like, damn, like I'm not that thing as much as this other person is that thing because of the ways that I am also doing these other things. So I think like I've really had to like focus on being kind to myself around the variety of ways that I'm meant to like transmit spiritual, divine essence and joy and bliss is like, yeah, like I think that there's ways that I'm being used in my ministry is circus. Sometimes it's puppetry. And I think like in the young adult realm, I do feel like, you know, I'm so glad that as a person who's thinking about young adults, like I've healed so much and been intentional around healing aspects of my young adult experience through the experience of writing books, and also having young people, having had the experience of young people sort of remind me of the sort of, I don't know, like I would say like the sacredness of, you know, ancestry that exists in youth. Because I do feel like young people really are connected to ancestors on a whole other level than, you know, we are when we're older, you know, and when we're much older.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I loved about your book is like the teenage dialogue of it all. Like, I was like, oh my God. I was like, that's how they talk. I'm like, that's how I sounded with that attitude. Like, and it's like, once again, you know, because I had known your background as a youth worker, I was like, this woman must have been studying these kids because
and I didn't even know it. I just love how young people of all, you know, whatever your generation of young people is, there's something about how we talk. Like we trust and lean and rock slang like nobody's business. Like when you're in your 30s, you don't slang it out. I mean, there's some niggas who, you know, I mean, I still talk majority like slang and shit like that, obviously. But when you're young, like they're the ones who create it, you know, and popularize it.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like the attitude, it's like the attitude that you know everything, but then the wonder of the world that is so new to you. That's young people. I know everything, but also like everything is amazing. And it's like,
totally.
It's like it's a spirit that is just that of youth. And it's like, it just eventually kind of like matures into something else, you know, as we go with our time on earth. So for me, I was so refreshed I was back in the mind of a teenager, and I was like, oh my God, I remember how I just didn't care, how I wanted to just do what I wanted to do. And I didn't care if it was right for me. And I questioned all of your things in this. And that was so refreshing to see from Black women, you know, it was refreshing for me to see from Caribbean. I was just like, I was reading characters that I had never read before, but they were people that I had met before. So
talk about it.
You know, it's like we grew up on like Babysitter Club, and we grew up on a certain type of YA novel, right?
Thank you.
And like, you know, I love me some Babysitter Club. You know, I was here for Babysitter Club. I was all about that. But at the same time, once I, as a young person, was getting into my own spirituality and my own things, which was really what's happening around 15 years old. I remember like there weren't like, I wasn't into Babysitter Club anymore. And then it's like, I would read like Eric Jerome Dickey or like, you know, Shineska Jackson was like, what I love. Shineska Jackson is like from LA. Like she's like a local author, but she'd be writing like grown woman stuff. And
what's her name?
Shineska Jackson.
Okay.
She has this book, I think it's called Little Mama's Rules. It's about dating, man. It's like something you don't read when you're 15. Like, that's like what I read.
Listen, talk about it. I read like V.C. Andrews. I was talking about V.C. Andrews and Anne Rice. Like, just looking for some sexy bits.
Right. And so I think it's
from vampires.
Yeah,
fuck it.
It's like YA is a whole new vibe right now. It's not what it was when we were coming up. Like YA, like the depth, the quality of writing, for example. When I read your book, once again, the quality of writing is that of an adult novel. You know, the quality of writing, it's not like, let me dumb this down so they understand. You know, we're getting beautiful imagery. You know, we're getting fierce dialogue. We're learning, you know, like we're getting educated. You know, we're getting diverse character, you know, and setting. So it's like, I'm reading it and I'm like, wow, like how amazing would it be to come across something like this, you know, as a 16-year-old girl, you know, and I got your book from the library, and as you can,
thank you, friend. I love, oh my gosh. It like sometimes always like really makes my heart happy to be like, I have something in the library, because the library's raised me.
And they also have your audiobook, honey, just so you know.
Okay. Oh my gosh, you should listen to the audiobook. Okay, so there's this woman, Bonnie Turpin, who's like the Angela Bassett of audiobooks,
Amazing.
is like she's done Children of Blood and Bone. She's done like everything. And she does the Audrey sections and the Queenie sections. And the way she does speak, and it is so cute.
I have to listen to the audiobook.
Yeah, a lot of people love it. And I read Mabel. So it's kind of like, people are like, oh, Junauda, you did a good job. But like, that's the fun part about being an author, because like, if you love books the way we love books, it feels so good to be like, oh my gosh, like, I feel like so sacred. Like I mean, I think about Judy Blume often and like S.E. Hinton, who are both, white writers. And I think of like, obviously Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and like these Black, feminist writers too, who also, I feel like, The Bluest Eye as well as The Color Purple are kind of YA novels, in that like the characters start at ages that are like 16 and 12 and things like that.
And that's why we put them in school. They give them to us as if they are YA novels.
Right. And I think Judy Blume, what I loved about her work, I think growing up, was that it wanted to talk about emotional things. Like as a kid, like I liked YA that was like there's this one book I used to like. It wasn't YA, it was like middle aged. The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. or Basil E. Frankweiler.
Oh yeah.
And it was like where the kids like, stayed in the museum and like got coins out of the fountain and would sleep in the queen's bed at night. I forgot why they ran away. It was like some first world problems, because these kids was like from the Upper West Side or some shit. But like, I love shit where I was like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like we're doing some sneaky, it's just like weird, like experimental, like I like Roald Dahl. Like, so I think so much of like writing this book, like is also like, I've studied so many books unbeknownst to me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I love poetry, and I love, books with like structures in them, and, things that play, things that like move in time. So yeah. Oh, thank God for books, right? Thank God for books and libraries.
I mean, it's like once again, in this time and space where we literally have all 24 hours to ourselves, like, I was like, okay. I was like, now's a great time to read my friend's book. And as I sit on my balcony in the sun, I'm reading it.
I'm with you.
Yeah, and I'm like, I got my feet up, the sun is shining. I'm on the balcony. I look up, 40 minutes have passed. I'm looking like, wait, was I was just on the beach in Trinidad? Like, I'm like, wait, the way reading transports you, not the way that, and as much as I love video and Netflix, it's not the same sort of transport. Like, it's like I was taken out of my reality, which was a great help for this current time. Like, I was like, wow, I got to dip out really quickly. And I mean, for me, that's just a testament to your storytelling skills and your writing skills, which like, honestly, just as your friend, I was like feeling proud. I was like, oh my God, this book.
And that means a lot, because y'all, man, Malaika got bars on bars on bars and bars on bars, man.
Oh my God.
And it means a lot. Like there's like some true heads, artists who I deeply respect, who have shown me love, and you just kind of A, taking the time to read the book, and B, being like, yo, sis, that.
Yes. Because I feel like good art makes the world better. I feel like good art makes life easier. I feel like good art is health. I feel like art is the lifeblood of our planet and of humans and of spirits. So for me, like, I am passionate about art. I take art seriously. I nerd out on art. And when I come across good art, I'm completely like luxuriating in it because it's luxurious to me, And so it's like, for me, it was to know you, to know that it's like, I just felt like it was a full circle moment to go from being in New York, searching for yourself, being a poet, being an aerialist, doing community work, putting on plays. And then it's like, boom, here we have this document, this book that I think will be a treasure for years and generations to come,
Thank you, baby.
This is a question that I have especially for people that are listening, that for them, maybe the idea of writing a book is so daunting. How do you what's that alchemy between creativity and deadline? You know, like what's the bridge?
Mm-hmm.
How do we get that?
Yeah, I think what's beautiful is that like with like if capitalism wasn't around and we could just do our thing, these wouldn't be questions. These are, you know, things that are in our spirits to create, you know? So I really feel like I tried to find that space of being like, yo, like this is just a book that I want to have come to me. I had a great editor who wouldn't sweat me. But like, you know, if it'd be like, I mean, he wouldn't sweat me the first week after the deadline. Like he would be cool because he knew I was good for it.
Right.
You know, I think that was also the thing is that like editors, what I realized, or at least the experience I had, is just the person to be like, hold you accountable to your dream for your work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And help you connect the dots that you're already putting out there. You know what I'm saying? So I think for me, like what I committed to was that I would just try to spend a lot of time writing. And if it wasn't coming, I wouldn't force it. I would do something else. And that's what the astrology poems came about. Because I was like, shit, I'll write some poetries about poetries. I always say that word.
Poetry.
I write
some of y'all my poetries.
I know. My poetry. So I would write the astrology poetries as a way of being like, all right, I'm not going to force this thing. Like there needs to be something like that. Like I would take a walk. I would have a conversation. Like I was working with these beautiful Black children over in East St. Paul who, you know, were kids who like had to be a part of this program. I don't know if it was because they had truancy issues or what, but these were like the most beautiful, vibrant Black kids. And what they like, it was kind of a gift because I like quit working education mainly and have been doing more art. But then I got this opportunity through a friend of mine to like work with these kids. She's like, would you come and teach some puppet stuff and some art shit? And I was like, yeah, I'll make it about Afrofuturism and we could just talk about shit. Which is just how I do it. I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, hire me as whatever. I'm coming through as these little kids, auntie, yo, the big sister, and just like sharing things. So I love seeing how fluid sexually the girls were. The boys, I couldn't really tell, but boys are so beautiful. You know what I mean? Like they're so free.
Yeah.
Like the character of Terrell, who like one of the characters, like first little boyfriend, he just reminds me of that like sweet Black boy who's just like, yeah, he's just figuring it out too. And he just like likes people, likes girls, likes Mabel. And I think like, you know, I had me like, you know, cause I'm also like, was always a unique kid. And I don't think I was the girl that people was trying to kick it to, especially in Minneapolis. Like people were certainly color struck. But I remember it'd be like the light-skinned boys would always like me. You know what I mean? And they'd always be like, and I don't know, Terrell wasn't light-skinned though. But I remember like, it just would be like somebody who, would just be awkward and weird in their own way, you know? So I feel like it's like, like there's all kinds of Black boys, you know, of all kinds of, you know, vibes and like, you know, thicknesses and complexions and like gender expressions and, you know what I mean? Like for me, it's like, I really wanted to create a variety of Black kids and Black expression that wasn't like tropish. And I really would check myself and be like, yo, like, are there things that are making, like that are making Blackness small to Black kids? Is it all about the oppression? Like, of course, to talk about Blackness isn't to exclude the fact that Blackness exists in an anti-Black existence. You know what I mean? So it's like, we have to include that. But like, I also feel like there's so much like magic and inherent like depth in Blackness, you know, that young people should get to explore in the ways that I explored it via like The Color Purple, you know, and just being like, and it'd be in the South, but here you have like, you know, these juke joints, here you have like these people and all these kind of sexual relationships and being with this woman and they baby mama died or they baby mama left them. And this is, you know what I mean? Like, this is real Black shit. Like, this is the stuff we go through, you know, but we're also so beautiful and like glittery and sacred, you know?
What has this book taught you, you know, about yourself?
That I could do things that I didn't know like I knew hypothetically a book was within me, but actually putting out a book lets me know I could put out books.
Yeah.
You know, because I think in my shando, I really did truly feel like I'm an artist, but I always kind of like was afraid to live into that reality. And the book is to me also like has broken me into an opportunity of like I'm working on my second book now, which I'm just like I have like this time around I'm like, oh yeah, I can write books. And I'm also friends with other people who are whatchamacallit, writers, who are young adult writers, who are Black young adult writers. And Brown, like Gabby Rivera and Nick Stone, Candace Illo. There's like all of these cool, you know, Tomi Adeyemi, Elizabeth Acevedo, Jason Reynolds. Like there's so many dope, down, cool, and like, and there's so many more. Like I feel like I'm so grateful to be a young adult writer, because I think like I also thought I would be a novelist for adults, because like so many of the books I think we read growing up were like adult fiction, like the ones that I really fell in love with, like Toni Morrison. It was like, I mean, majority was adult fiction, but her first book was a YA novel essentially.
Basically. That's true. That's crazy. I never thought about it like that, but you're 100% correct. Because don't they give you Blue Aside to read in like 7th grade?
Yeah.
So, you know, you read that in like 7th, 8th grade. If your school is worth a damn, you know, they're going to give you that.
School was worth a damn.
If your school was worth a damn, you might have got Song of Solomon in the high school, you know.
Yeah.
He was really about it, you know.
Oh my gosh. You want to hear something crazy? This is like, my childhood, yo. So my mom had like this, like, I don't know if it was a nervous breakdown or a nervous breakthrough. Let's call it nervous breakthrough. She decided to move me and my sisters down to Florida, to the Miami, like Fort Lauderdale area. Like my dad, he'd been out here hoeing, having kids on the side, and she was like tired of seeing the bullshit. So she like just like was like sold our house and moved to Florida. And I remember being there and like I couldn't get into school right away. So girl, me and my mom would go to the library because she's also a bookhead, and just like I would clean it out of like, you know, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Toni Morrison, like all of the greats. Like I would just read them shits, girl, like right? And be up to like 6 a.m. Like I just had no schedule. And then me and my mom would go to the beach because we're both morning people. So we'd go to the beach. Anyway, so then also too, that when we came back to Minneapolis, because we ended up moving back to Minneapolis, I couldn't get into school right away. So then I was put into this like alternative school. And girl, they was like, hey, you are way beyond any of these worksheets. Just read any book you want. I'd be like, all right. Richard Wright. Okay, James Baldwin. Like to me, it was like these kind of curated readings, because you're just like, it's all in the fucking books anyway.
Right.
It's all in this knowledge.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yep.
Anyways, I'm so grateful. I'm just so grateful. So I'm so grateful all the books I got to read before social media.
Right.
Took my brain out.
Yeah, because I mean, it makes it difficult to do. It's just, it takes our time that we would have used for possibly reading. So yeah, it's something that we have to make space for. I love that you love the library the way that I love the library. Like my library experience was similar. I used to get tutored in math because I'm dyslexic as hell, and I would meet my math teacher at the library, and I'd be early. And that's how I found my favorite poets. I would just walk through the poetry. I love the poetry. I would just walk through and like whatever I judged books by their cover, like whatever was interesting. And that's how I found Sonia Sanchez, because it was a book called Homegirls and Hand Grenades. And I'm like, wait, I say homegirls, so who's writing a book about homegirls? I was like, who that? And that's how I found Sonia Sanchez. I was like, what is this? So, you know.
Can I tell you a quick Sonia Sanchez story?
Absolutely.
Because she's a Libra too, right?
Is she?
She's a Libra. I saw her at the Philly train station. And I was like super like, oh my gosh, that's Sonia Sanchez. Because, you know, she literally has an aura.
She does. She really does.
Yeah, just like a vibe. Like she has like a smell of incense and tenderness. You know what I'm saying?
She's a whole vibe.
So anyways, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Sonia Sanchez. And I was like, man, I have to go say hi to Sonia Sanchez or I'm gonna regret it.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyways, like I walk up to her and like she's talking to somebody and like they finish talking and then right before, right after she like comes up and I'm like, hey, I just want to tell you I'm a big fan of your work and your, whatever. And she's like, yeah, baby, great. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna get my ticket. Go have a seat right there and then we could talk, And then we just like chilled for like an hour and a half where she talked to me about gardening and talked to me about like, all kinds of things about her son or her children. I don't remember now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to me, I was just like, wow, she's a regular person and she's an amazing soul.
Okay, so I got this one last thing I want to do, right? It's called the higher octave. Higher octave is basically like, if you can think of a time in your life where you might have gotten some news that you didn't like, that was kind of like things didn't turn out the way you wanted, but after a little bit of time, you saw that that was actually the perfect thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so for me, when those things happen in my life, I call them like the higher octave, meaning like it just allows me to see it from like a kind of an aerial view.
Mm-hmm.
So have you ever, whether it be in the process of doing your book or any of your other creative projects or just being a person in the world, has there been a time where, you thought something turned out not in your favor, but you realized way after the fact that actually it was like great that it happened the way it happened?
Yes. Oh my gosh. What a great question. Hear me. That's a great question. The first thing that comes to my mind, and I think there are probably a couple others as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing that comes to my mind is when like a huge friend group I had kind of just like, I don't know, like all these people left my life.
Yeah.
Women who I'd felt very connected to and had created art with and all these kinds of things. And I was super devastated because just the way it happened felt kind of foul,
Yeah.
And hurtful. Like I'm a sensitive person.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Oh yeah, Cancer.
Hey, love me or leave me.
I know, Cicidine.
I know.
That was true.
Yeah, so I feel like for me, like to me, it was devastating at the time, like it truly was. And then what happened? And then I was like, oh my gosh. I feel like if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have had the time and the energy and the sense of like dignity. Cause it also was a time where I asserted my dignity around like, yeah, like how do I want to be treated by people,
Yeah.
Like I've been kind of a softie in a lot of ways, but I'm also like truly a warrior. Like, and I think there was a part of me that had to step into defending and loving on myself in a certain way that experience provided me. And I think it also made me be like, yeah, like I had a hell of a lot of fake ass niggas to be kicking it with.
Right.
And I could be writing my book instead.
Talk about it. Somebody needs to
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like, there's a lot of people who will take up your time because they may not love you. Like be around people who truly love you. Connect with people. And doesn't mean you hang out with people every day. And people who love you understand that you grind in and you an artist.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And they feel your love regardless if you're able to have the same amount of time to give them.
Right.
But I do feel like there's people that like, I think initially when I was, moved back to Minneapolis and was like, creating art, it's just like, there sometimes can be currents of like, oh yeah, people aren't able to cheer you on or they have feelings about you that are coming out sideways. And it's so easy to internalize that. And it kind of is just distracting you. And I think, yeah, be around people that allow you to blossom in big, beautiful, bold ways. And if like, in your spirit, you don't feel like loved by that person or those people, like it's okay to acknowledge them and give gratitude for what they were in your life.
Yeah.
And, cut that tie or release them in a way that me as a Cancerian,
Right.
you know what I mean, at times struggle with. But I think like that sort of higher octave moment in my life was like, oh yeah, like I don't need to like accumulate people.
Right.
You know, it's like I just need to I need to like cultivate and like curate
Yes.
my like intersections and engagements with people, and not in a, I think I used to think, oh, that's being bougie, or that's not being bougie, but being like, you know, who do I think I am, or like I love everybody, like I want to be whatever, but
Yeah, totally. Right.
but at the end of the day, you just gonna be like, listen, you know what I mean? Like I only got so much time and energy for people. And I spent a lot of time with people who like at the end of the day didn't love me, but that taught me something too.
Right.
So I feel like, you know, now I feel like all of the people who are in my vicinity are people who are like, love seeing me win, love supporting me, who help me sort of become a person that's less about comparison and competition, because that shit ain't a part of our existence. Like we don't need to be at that vibration at all.
Right. This, I love that. I love that. It's like the loving release of people who no longer serve you, and feel free to cultivate and curate your crew. And that is the higher octave from Junauda Petrus. About you, where can my listeners find you, girl? Where can they find you? Your website, all of that.
Junauda.com, JUNAUDA.com. And then there's also my Instagram is Junauda. My name, JUNAUDA. My Twitter is Junauda, JUNAUDA. And yeah.
Y'all see the pattern?
Yeah, exactly. And you could just Google me and pop, pippity pop.
Yeah. So cool to learn about Junauda and her journey, right? So dope to listen to a conversation between creatives, you know? And hey, if you made it this far, I think I love you. So why don't you go ahead and follow me on socials, on IG and Twitter. I'm Malaika Jules. That's MALAIKAJULES. Until next time, stay inspired.